Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. Good to see you and cheers, my dears. Oh, Jill, good to see you. I wonder if I put the thing, I'd love to see you, but I was expecting a full page of people. I wonder if I messed something up in the Facebook group. Is that possible? Gosh, I hope not. In the Milwaukee Brewers. That sounds good. Kaz, there you are. Happy Friday. Okay, that makes me feel better. I think that I posted this yesterday, and I hope I popped this video to the top where you can find me. Happy Friday. It's great to see you, Doreen. Cheers, my dears. Happy Friday from upstate New York. Good to see you and glad that you're there. As you can see, I'm at my mom's place again, having another kind of busy weekend and needing to do a lot of typing work. So came here, try to get some stuff done, get a little bit of help. Malia, happy Friday. Happy cocktail night. Good to see you. Lisa, good to see you. Happy Friday. I think I just logged on a minute too early. That scared me. You know me and computers. But good to see everybody on Friday night. Christine, happy Friday. There you are. I love it when that harp pulls up. I know that it's you. That makes me really happy. Good to see you. Tara, good to see you. Cheers, my dears. You are going to be so upset with me. I forgot to bring the rug to my mom in the rug exchange, the 6-inch rug exchange. I am a disaster. I promise I'm going to bring it this week. I don't know what is wrong. Oh, I do know what's wrong with me. I'm being pulled in 1,000 different directions and I am about to snap. But that is something that was easy, that I am so sorry that fell through the cracks. I promise I will get that to her this week. I want to show her in person and not send a photo of it. So that is a huge shame on me. Cheers, my dears. I hope that the video was easy to find. And I bet there'll be more buddies popping on. If anybody's on Facebook, hey, Chrissy, good to see you. Maybe like or put it to the top. Teresa, good to see you. Cheers, my dears. You're all finding your way, right? I think I should have popped it a bit earlier. That's the thing about being a little bit ahead of schedule, which I hardly ever am ahead of the curve in any way. But when I am, sometimes it's like these things get buried in Facebook. But happy Friday. It's a great episode tonight, so I'm so glad that you're there. Thank you so much. I need to be a bit more on top of my game. It's been so busy with everything. And, you know, I've been working on this book project, which is fantastic. And I posted in the Facebook group, but in case you're not on Facebook, I am definitely looking to see what you have done in putting this book project together. For example, this weekend I'm working on a Quilly project, and I don't often do Quilly. I don't often incorporate it into my pieces just because of time. And in one regard, it's very nice to slow down a little bit. I'm looking at Pradi, at Quilly, at other forms of rug making, like Amish toothbrush, braiding, possibly locker hooking, latch, of course, things that I don't always do. So if you feel like you have examples of these different kinds of rug making techniques, and also rug hooking, of course, in punch, and miniature punch and Russian punch, same thing, I would love to see examples of those. I really would, because as I've said before, with a project like this that has a big reach, I don't want it to just be me, me, me. I would love to include stuff of yours too. And rather than just going to Pinterest or something like that, I would love to use pieces from our group and incorporate as many as possible. So think about what you've got. Sue's, happy Friday night in Kansas. Great to see you. Marty, cheers to you too. Happy Friday. Sharon, happy Friday. And Kirsten, happy Friday. Kirsten, if I didn't pop the thing enough on the page, if you have time, if you can go in there and either like it or do up or one of those classic things that the post, because we have a great episode tonight, a really great episode tonight. Down the rabbit hole, big time. You're going to go really down the rabbit hole. Seems like I always do the most cozy episodes of Cocktail Night when I'm visiting my mom. The last one was the home one, which was ultra cozy. And one of the ones before was the Alice Butler night, which was, I think, arguably the most cozy. But tonight there is competition for most cozy episode because I have a book in my hand, and help me with pronunciation if I'm saying this wrong, called Hooked. It appears to me on Tancook, could equally be Tancook or something like that, but I'm going to stick with Hooked on Tancook unless somebody corrects me, and I hope you do if I'm wrong. Lily, great to see you. Caroline, great to see you. Happy Friday. A Woolen Life. Hello in Chicago. Last night was so much fun, wasn't it? We had our second Designing Like Frida class last night, and it really was fun. It's so amazing how classes can be so different from one to the next. Content is fairly the same, but conversation takes us in different directions every time. And I love that as the teacher. I mean, I'm a participant too. I'm just more of a host than a teacher, I think. But I love the way that it takes us in different directions, especially because art is so subjective, isn't it? And particularly Frida is so dynamic and often raw and emotional. And so it took us in lots of different places last night. It was a very fun class. I've already gotten emails. People missed signing up for Frida and Van Gogh and Magdalena Breiner, E.B., and Matisse, all of the past classes. I will try to bring them all back at some point, do some kind of a Grand Slam month, and just offer them all in person again, because these conversations that we kick up when we're talking about art and looking at art together and trying to design using the motifs that that particular artist was particularly reliant on, takes us all in different directions and is a great exercise in not just composition, but inspiration and conversation. So it was a lot of fun. It really was. Joan, good to see you. You did an entire sheep rug in Quillies. Stop it. And pillow and rug borders and Pradi. Please send pictures. ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. I will super look forward to seeing that. That sounds fantastic. I do miss you, Lily. I know you're working hard. I know you work in like a hospital nursing setting, and it must be high drama and busy and exhausting. So whenever I see you, I'm extra grateful because I know you're coming from a very busy world. It was a good class, Kirsten. It was a really good class. It is so fun to brainstorm. And I'm looking forward to the next one, and I have not chosen an artist yet. So if you have a sort of great fondness for a specific artist and you'd like to see a design like next month, please let me know, because I have been tossing around some ideas, and I had like one foot on a banana peel and the other on some kind of a racetrack, a roller skate, and my thoughts are not super clear right now. So if you have a great inspiration, I would love to hear that request. It might be the thing that I go with, because I love to have a Grand Slam class every month. Now, this book really took me by surprise. Lisa, you sent me this, right? You sent me the early one morning. I logged on at like 5:30, and Lisa had sent a message saying, "Have you seen this book yet?" Catherine, great to see you. I know it's not easy, Lily, especially now. I can't imagine. I can't imagine. But I got online and I went and found the book immediately and bought the book immediately, and I watched the video. I hope after this video you'll watch the video. I put both of the book, the Amazon affiliate link to this book, with the video from YouTube of the opening of this show, because it was a live show. A nice YouTube video on that too. Both of those things are in the description of this video tonight. But I have permission from the author Hetty van Gurp to talk about this book and look at this book, and I hope she's on tonight. Sometimes it's hard to log on, but I hope, Hetty, that you are on, and thank you for letting us look at this book, because this is one of the great rug hooking books of all time. It truly is. And this is right up, you know how the one I'm holding in my hand is always my favorite? I think this is my favorite. This is just fantastic. Kathy, good to see you. Oh, Hetty is on. Hetty, am I saying Tancook correctly? Or Tancook? It's hard. It's going to be hard to spell phonetically too. The main thing is this book is over the top phenomenal. So I want to look at some of the rugs in this book and talk about the story behind the book and what took Hetty to this little island off the coast of Nova Scotia, and that whole story, because the story is so beautiful and romantic. Atha Administrator, greetings from Klamath Falls. Kay, good to see you, Kay. I'm so glad you're there. Oh, Lily, you're taking a nebular class with Michelle. Oh, that is so funny. Michelle is local to me, and she's a good friend. She has been buzzing around like a crazy firefly lately. She is full of busyness. Edward Munch, that is a great one. Interesting, Suze. I'm going to see if I can find more of his work beyond my son Teddy's favorite painting, The Scream. And maybe we can work with that. I'm going to have to look at him in detail and make sure that there are enough sort of tropes and motifs that he repeats that we can pull some of those layers off and use them in rug hooking patterns. That's a great suggestion because the colors are fantastic. The energy is fantastic. Very expressionist artist, right? Let's think about that as a great option. I like that. Thank you. So this book, Hetty, I just fell in love with this book. I just read it in one sitting, which I never do, partly because of time and partly because of stupidity and concentration. But I just could not get enough of this story. It was so charming. It's such a first-hand account. I'm going to read parts of it and do a lot of paraphrasing, and I'm going to leave a lot left to the imagination because if you fall in love with this book the way that I did, you're going to want to order it. And I don't want to do complete spoilers. I want to show you some of the greatest hits and an already solid gold album. And I want to look at some of the ones that I love the most, but there are many more in this book that you might love. And I hope that you think about getting this book. What a treasure. It just came out, 2021. And again, the video for the exhibit is online. I love how this book starts out. It was like heartstrings right away, where it says, right at the beginning, there are some beautiful photographs of what the island looks like. You know, isn't it? I have not been to Canada often enough, although I am French-Canadian by origin. And Hetty, we have something else in common. I was also born in the Netherlands, and I left as a very young child and grew up in the U.S., but then I moved back to the Netherlands for a huge part of my grown-up life and had my kids over there and just moved back a few years ago. But we have that in common, and your name is very Dutch, so I did wonder about that. But, you know, we all have different sort of ideas of what an island is, right? And we sometimes talk about this when we talk about design and composition. The fact that the English language has more words than any other language is exciting, isn't it? And how we can talk about a lane or a path or street or a road, and you know that it's very different than, for example, a boulevard, right? Just in terms of scale and what you expect. Well, an island for me works the same way. And when I think of islands, I tend to think of the islands off Cape Cod, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. Sometimes I think about Block Island, off Rhode Island, but you probably think about different islands. And this really took me to a new place. Like, I have not been to Tancook Island, and I have not been to Canada nearly enough. And it really, really transported me looking at the photos that are in here. And this is the first line of the text. It says, "If you're lucky enough to live on Tancook, you're lucky enough." Isn't that great? Isn't that great? I mean, it really says it all, doesn't it? You know, and it does bring us back into the crucible, burning everything off, all the busyness of life, all the craziness of Monday to Friday. And you think about it, what are the things that are the most important? And this book, Hetty really defines the things that are the most important in her journey to decide to come to this very remote place. And it's interesting to watch, and it's certainly thought-provoking. Here's another beautiful image of the island. I'll try to get them close. I got a lot of lights on me, so hopefully not too much glare because, of course, it's quite dark. It's getting to be that time, isn't it? I don't know about you, but when I'm waking up in the morning at like 5:30, when I'd normally enjoy waking up, it's dark for like another 2 hours. It's hard, isn't it? But we're going to push through until we have the shortest day, and then we'll start celebrating on the other side of the year, right? So this is all so beautiful. The first part, Hetty talks about Big Tancook Island. And this part is called How I Got There. So I'm going to read some of it and paraphrase it because this is a beautiful sort of background story as answering the question, how does one find themselves on a very remote island off of Nova Scotia, right? And this is how it can happen. It probably can happen to you too. This is how it can happen. She writes, "It surprises people when I tell them that at age 67, I moved to a small island, an hour's ferry ride from the mainland of Nova Scotia. An island with a population of 140 full-time residents and none of the conveniences or services found in most towns and cities. How I got there can only be characterized as serendipity." Dum, dum, dum. That is a great beginning, isn't it? No agent would ever turn that down for the start of a book. She says, "After making the difficult and well-thought-out decision that it was time to simplify our lives, my husband and I moved to an apartment in Halifax in 2013. We were living in a century-old house in rural Nova Scotia and believed that we were getting too old to be concerned about endless repairs, shoveling in the winter, stacking firewood, tending a large garden. We also wanted to be closer to our grandchildren and hospitals. So then she goes on to talk about finding an apartment in Halifax, which is the capital of Nova Scotia, and a little bit of city life there, also beautiful parks. So this is where they end up going from this large sort of responsibility of a big old house to this apartment in the center of Halifax, much more sort of cosmopolitan, right? But in the early summer of 2015, well into our second year of apartment living, I noticed a friend's Facebook post advertising her sister's old house for sale on Big Tancook Island. The photos depicted a charming home in which time had stood still for decades. The house was being sold fully furnished, from cast iron beds to an antique cook stove and hooked rugs on the floors. The fact that the house was being promoted by a childhood friend on behalf of her sister made it somehow even more appealing. I'm turning the page, but I do have to say here, I know we are not all huge fans of Facebook, but serendipity. And once in a while, you do see something on Facebook that changes your life. But you know what else this reminds me of? I just thought of it, Hetty. I wonder if anybody out there has read the book by, I think, Elizabeth von Arman, called Enchanted April. And it was also a beautiful movie. It was absolutely beautiful, about set in probably the 1920s. Three women who find themselves at strange sort of difficult crossroads of their lives. And they all find an ad in the newspaper for this rental property in Italy. And for three very different reasons, they go, strangers, and become roommates. And it is such a beautiful movie. If you haven't seen it or read the book, you really should. It's very moving. It's absolutely beautiful. And Hetty goes on to say, on my first visit, I was interested in the charm of the house, the vintage cups and saucers on the cupboard shelves, and the antique hooked mats. I'm sorry, I missed the main part. Fast forward, that was a spoiler. She says, although I'd only ever visited Tancook one time for a few hours, I could easily imagine spending summers there and walking the shores in search of treasures from the sea, exploring the woods, and just being away from the commerce of city life, since Tancook has no services or amenities of any kind. It does sound charming, doesn't it, Teresa? And this is the part that really got me choked up, because this is the sort of Enchanted April serendipitous moment coming. And here is the serendipitous part of the story. Shortly after seeing my friend's Facebook post, by complete coincidence, I received a call from a friend asking me if I wanted to accompany her to spend the day with Lucy Neatby, famous knitter, right, world famous knitter, who happened to have a home on Big Tancook Island. We probably all know that name too. That's like one of those sort of K facet, celebrity names that really gets you. So Lucy drove us around the island, and along the way I mentioned the house, which was ever present in my mind. I know where I can find the key, Lucy announced without a moment's hesitation. Lucy pulled into a driveway, knocked on someone's door, and came out with a key. When we arrived at the property, I immediately noticed the apple trees, lupins and rhubarb growing in abundance. From the front yard, I could see the ocean and the wharf lined with fishing boats. Inside, as we walked from room to room, I could easily envision living in this island house. It would need a little work, just a bit of paint and some redecorating. The house was filled with fascinating artifacts, from solid wood furniture dating back to the early 1900s when the house was built, old bottles and crocks and cast iron beds, a wringer washing machine like the one my mother used to use when I was a child. My grandmother used one of those too. There were treasures everywhere I looked. The shed was filled with reminders of the island's rich fishing heritage, from classic vintage buoys, carved duck decoys, barrels, hand-knotted fish nets, to antiquated farming tools and oxen yokes. She says one of the things that attracted me to the house were, of course, the hooked rugs in almost every room. Can you imagine? Can you imagine this? I can't imagine this scenario. I have to say, Hetty, this reminds me of, I'm going to stop, but even a more, I think, familiar reference than Elizabeth von Arman. If anybody's ever read books by, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, what is it called? Guilty Pleasure. Like Victoria Holt or Velda Johnston, writing these kinds of books where the main character comes off the beaten trap, sort of strays from the trajectory of a very predictable life and ends up doing something in the Italian countryside, or the books were always called like The Etruscan Smile, or the serpent's snare, and they were always set somewhere exotic. And there was always someone who found a key somewhere and got access to this place that opened a door that had not been opened for decades. There was always a scene like that. And I always thought, God, that's so romantic and great. I hope that that happens to me. And it still hasn't happened to me, but it happened to Hetty, which goes to show it can happen, right? I just love that. So they finish the tour of the property, and of course she has a lot of questions, because this is a real far cry, isn't it? This is going out on a real limb. How does the garbage collection work? What if there's a fire? Does the ferry run year round? That's an important one. How do you get groceries? What do people do for entertainment? All of these really practical questions, right? Because probably at this point in Hetty's mind, the pendulum is kind of swinging between what your heart is dictating, is what your heart is asking for, and practical things, because the practical things are where you get traction and safety in life, right? Those things ground you. As soon as you walk away from the sort of familiar things, you're kind of floating a little bit, and it's sometimes uncomfortable, and it's always scary. So she's asking these kinds of questions because you can already tell by the writing that she's really in love with this house. If the house didn't do it, the key didn't do it, the driving around with Lucy didn't do it, certainly the hooked rugs did it, right? Hello, April. Good to see you. Cheers, my dears, and wet my whistle. So she ends up not getting the house right away. Now, this is a big undertaking, right? So this isn't something that you would jump into foolishly and rashly. So she started sitting it out and thinking it out, and went back to living in Halifax. But her husband, Ward, was feeling, and she, quite restless in the city. Hetty's already thinking about this other possibility, and then the house pops up again, or the post pops up again, early in the spring, again, same thing on Facebook. And then it's like she starts bringing it up more often around her husband, who immediately says, no, not practical, not happening. But she goes on to talk about how she was obviously bringing it up quite a bit. It was a big theme because it was something that was important, right? These things have to come out one way or the other. And it kept coming out. And she said he could at one point really see the writing on the wall and knew where this was going. So they ended up at the end of May taking a ferry with a real estate agent over to the island. Barbara, good to see you. Barbara, we're looking at this book tonight, Hooked on Tancook. Barbara, have you ever been to Tancook? Because we've got a lot of Canadians on the call, I know, and I just wonder. So this is the part where she talks about how on the first visit she was very interested in the charm of the house, all of the bits and bobs that were around the house, all of those alluring, keys to the past. But on the second time looking at the house, it was definitely time to look at some of the more practical things, like the septic system, the heating system, leaky ceiling in one bedroom, the damp basement, these kinds of things. And again, the pendulum swinging, right? Practical dreams, crossing over reality, practical. It's so hard making decisions like this. This also reminds me of the great book and movie. What was it called? The Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House. Do you remember that one? I think that was Cary Grant. That's one of my favorite books. I love the movie too, but that's one of my favorite books because he buys a terrible money pit, which is not what happens here, that he falls in love with in the countryside in Connecticut. But that kind of a thing, all these worries start to surface. But in any case, a month later, the house was theirs. You knew this was coming, right? Didn't you? We arrived at the end of June with paintbrushes in hand, and it didn't take long before the house started to look and feel comfortable. But it was the warmth and support of the neighbors that truly made this idyllic small community feel like home to us. We could sense the island community's spirit, having met a few local residents, some of whom had already recently made Tancook their home after falling in love with the island during a visit. So same kind of a love story, right? That's a real Valentine to the island, isn't it? When people come and they just fall in love, irreversibly in love, and they must be there, right? That's a love story. So she talks about moving in, right, and settling in. And at this point, it still has potential to go quite haywire, doesn't it? Go completely south. Luckily, it doesn't. Spoiler alert. But she talks about how kind and friendly and welcoming the neighbors were. And you don't get this every day. And you don't get this every day nowadays. I'm not going to start on one of my rants. But, it's the front porch thing, isn't it, that we talked about on the home episode a couple of weeks ago. That classic saying or meme that was something like, as soon as people took away the front porch and started to instead build the backyard patio or deck, that was when the community died, and when people, for whatever reason, stopped feeling like they had to make eye contact or say hello or participate in other people's lives that lived immediately around them. So it's so nice to know that there are still these places and pockets in different places around the world where you still have that sense of being part of a community, because it's not everywhere, is it? And if you live in a place like that, I think you are lucky enough, right? I don't feel that way at all, but I think you are lucky enough if you have that sort of a dynamic going at home. So she says the first month was exceptionally dry. When our dug well was down to a few inches of water, our next door neighbors ran a hose from their house to ours and shared their water source. They also gave us a house key and welcomed us to do laundry and have showers at their home. Another neighbor regularly arrived with handfuls of garden spinach and tomatoes and baskets of strawberries. We're going to see him in a rug in a few minutes. No matter what challenges we faced, someone came to our rescue. This also reminds me, I'm going to stop, but this also reminds me of the great series by Peter Mayle called A Year in Provence. Remember that series too? I think it was a PBS series. Getting settled in there. And again, it was a bit more like Blandings with the house falling apart under their feet. So this is a quite different story. But the whole dynamic with fixing it up and with the neighbors and trying to build relationships with your neighbors. She said we spent our days painting and tearing up layers of linoleum. We hired an electrician to upgrade the wiring, installed a wood stove, added a deck. After a hard day of work, we strolled to the shore where we collected beach glass and simply enjoyed the tranquility of the island. By the end of that summer, returning to our apartment in the city was not even an option. After having experienced a few months of island camaraderie, the kindness of neighbors, and the natural beauty surrounding us, we gave notice to our apartment manager, and by September, we were full-time Tancook residents. So that's how it happens, isn't it? Serendipity. All of these little parts of the story. Carol, I'm happy to see you. I hope you're feeling well. You love that movie, Christine, huh? Oh, I'm so glad. It's such a great introduction to the book because it really sets us up to like the people of the island. And you're going to like the people of the island because you're going to see them in a lot of these rugs. Incidentally, the next part is called It's the People. And she says, what is it that makes people fall in love with a small island located an hour's ferry ride from the mainland off the southwestern coast of Nova Scotia, with no stores, theaters, gas stations, motels, bed and breakfasts, restaurants? This is rough. And then she goes on to talk about how with the groceries, they have to be purchased on the mainland and then placed in a metal box on the wharf, which is hoisted up onto the ferry by a crane. This is all a lot of shenanigans, isn't it? But it must be worth it. It's that kind of a place that it must be worth it. So she answers herself by saying it is the people. That's the reason. In the years that I've been here, I've observed that our experience upon arriving is a common experience for all newcomers. A warm and open acceptance of new arrivals is just a way of life on Tancook. When I first arrived, I was surprised that upon meeting someone new, I was never asked, "What do you do?" This part really struck me. This really struck me. My experience on the mainland was that this was usually the first question asked when meeting somebody for the first time. It seemed to me like an assessment of one's worthiness or status. No one asked what I had done with the first 60 years of my life. They simply accepted me like a used car on a lot as is. Isn't that so true? And I'm so careful, I have to say, when I'm in conversation with somebody new, not to ask them really specific questions like that, because it's so much nicer to know what the person is like, what they like, talk about the things that they like rather than work, because it's sort of pre-assuming the idea that you are defined by your work. And many people just fell into their work and they're not defined by anything other than their passions, and that's what they really want to talk about. So nice to see that written. I've never seen that expressed before, but it does make you think. Next time you're talking to somebody new, it is much more comfortable when somebody says to you, so where did you go anywhere exciting this summer? Do you have any plans? Something broad in general rather than like, what do you do? Because often the answer is, I don't do anything, or I don't do what I wish I did. And it brings up a lot of conversation that you don't even want to have in the first place, right? Carrie, good to see you. Oh, from Tampa Bay. Happy Friday. Now this part really got me, so I'm going to be careful because Hetty brings in the Mary Oliver poem, which always gets me, right? Like all teary and crazy when I'm live. This chapter, or this part, is called Your One Wild and Precious Life. And she says there was a point where they were still at the apartment, right? And they were sort of struggling with the idea of the lifestyle change right before they moved. And during that time, they traveled to Spain and took a long walk on the El Camino de Santiago trail, a lot of outdoor exercise and scenery up in the north of Spain. So that was just sort of an interlude. And during that time, she kept wondering to herself, thinking about the house, thinking about what kept bringing her thoughts back to the house, why this connection was probably so strong, right? And she expressed this to a friend. And a friend sent to her the Mary Oliver poem that's going to be on the next page. And she said, I read the poem and the aha moment came to me instantly. What did I want to do with my one wild and precious life? The question lingered in my thoughts as they walked all of those miles. And she said she did not want to allow complacency. She didn't want to spend the final act of her life being complacent and sort of going with the flow. And she said at 67, I could not afford to pass up a new adventure when it seemed to be calling to me so loud and clear. It's so poignant and it's so true, isn't it? These moments really bring out the daredevil in a person, don't they? And she says, the hooked rug that I made upon my return from walking the Camino was the literal writing on the wall that would foretell what lay ahead. So she comes back from Spain. This is right before they decide to go, and she makes this beautiful rug. Wait till you see. And then I'll share the poem, and then we can look at the rug again. Isn't that astonishingly striking and moving? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And here's the important grasshopper that's in the poem. So I'll read the poem because it's right here. And I know we've read this before. We love this poem. The Summer Day, Mary Oliver, my favorite poet. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out on the grass. The one who's eating sugar out of my hand. Who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. And tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Did you hear that, Ted? It was a beautiful poem. I hope Teddy, choking myself up, I hope Teddy gets involved. It is a fantastic rug in poetry at some time. This is my sweet Teddy. So that I found that super moving, Hetty. I found that super moving. And I found this super moving too. Another rug that she makes sort of in a sequence. She says, in the past, we traveled to a warm southern destination for a winter break, getting some sun, right? And in each of the first few winters after our move to Tancook, we spent a week in the sun. On one of those trips, I was feeling especially homesick, as I missed the peaceful days and quiet nights of our life on Tancook Island. In an email to a relative in Nova Scotia, I lamented that I longed to go back to our island. In her reply, she mentioned that my message to her made her think of the chorus from the song Bally High, remember, from South Pacific, from the musical? If you try, you will find me where the sky meets the sea. Here am I, your special island. Come to me, come to me. And here it is, the island. Here I am, your special island. Isn't that gorgeous? Hi, Kaz. I think that is so beautiful. I think that is so beautiful. It's so, it's almost like a constellation when all these points sort of meet and match and fit together, and your life takes a crazy turn, unexpected. That's what life is supposed to be, isn't it? It's not supposed to be that long desert road. It's supposed to be a constellation of points and twists and turns. So it's so nice to read the story of someone who's really had this journey. Now, she gets into the part of the book where we're looking at a gallery of rugs, and they're all exquisite. They are all fantastic. And I'm choosing some of the ones that I like the best to show, but there's many more in this book. And again, the link to the book is here, so it's very easy to find, and I do hope that you get the book. It is such a happy, feel-good book, you know. So I want to show you this rug first, and then I'm going to tell you about it, and I hope this is clear. You know I always have to fool with the camera. It's extra hard when we're here for some reason. It's almost like the atmosphere is working against me. There we go. And this bit on the left, where's my hand? Anyway, that shape, I'm afraid to move too much. That shape is the island, right? That brown shape is the island. And there's a character there that we're going to learn about. Every day, I could hear the island calling. So she says, in the summer of 2019, I was longing to start a new project, but was waiting to be inspired. It happened one hot afternoon in August when a friend was visiting from Toronto. We were sitting on the deck catching up on our lives when Dexter stopped by. Dexter was born and raised on Tancook and is always a good source of information about people and events of the past. Carrie, this book is called Hooked on Tancook, a collection of whimsical hooked mats by Hetty van Gurp, who is on with us tonight. So if you have a question for her, make sure that you ask. So Dexter is a great source of storytelling and events and people of the past. Our friend, recognizing that Dexter had a wealth of fascinating background knowledge about the island, asked him endless questions, one of them being, have you ever lived anywhere but Tancook? Dexter's response caused Hetty to jump up and rush into the kitchen to grab a pencil and a piece of paper. And I'm guessing she worked out the design or maybe was recording some of these great stories, but she did record Dexter in this beautiful rug. So this is the first rug we're seeing in this book that really shows one of the characters from the island. And here he actually is. Fantastic, huh? Isn't that something? You know, I have to say, I just love the overarching idea of this book. What a great idea to use your locality to pick out characters and people and special things about those people to work on a series of rugs, because I think all of us are often at a weird impasse that is usually psychological, crazy emotional speed bumps sometimes, sort of just working yourself into a corner of not feeling up to it, no ideas. And it is a huge, big idea to think about using the people around you and their stories as subjects for your rugs. That will be the gift that keeps on giving, right? This one's really funny too. It's called True Story. Let me show you the rug first. True Story. Let me bring it better in focus. There we go. It is beautiful work, Carrie, isn't it? Isn't that a great, great rug? So, True Story. Neil is a legend on Big Tancook Island. You'll often find him on the wharf checking his boat or telling whoppers. He's a great tall tale teller, right? He always has a story to share. Many of Neil's stories are followed with, that's pretty iffy. One of his favorite expressions. At least he realizes it, right? While many Tancook residents use this expression, nobody says it quite like Neil. So this is Neil with his son, right here. And again, this is this beautiful rug. Telling whoppers, telling great tall tales, and saying, that's pretty iffy, ain't it? You know, I also love the sort of hat tip to the dialect. I love to hear the way people talk in different places. I know my grandmother was a big one for saying, ain't it? And it's just funny. It was like an old-time Yankee thing here in New England. But, I mean, you rarely hear it. People over the years kind of clean up expressions like ain't it? But we tend to still say it at home when we're, fooling around being casual, because it's so much a part of our language still at home. I'm conscious of the fact, and it's probably not a nice thing to do, but I'm conscious of the fact when I'm speaking to other people in other settings to not use expressions that we've historically used around our house and in our family. But if you don't keep using them, then they fall by the wayside, don't they? So there is something to be said for using these old-time expressions. It gives a lot of character to your speech, and it makes sure that these expressions stay with us in our dialect, right? They don't become sort of defunct. I love this. I have a particular love for this one. One year I cut 7,000 pounds. And this is the image. Back in '89, I cut 7,000 pounds of cabbage. I absolutely love this rug. I absolutely love it. And then I had to look up the sort of business of growing cabbage on Tancook, because this made me think that's extraordinary. That's impossible. How could that be? And it is quite a thing. There's a to be continued in a minute when I finish this part, because there's a beautiful photo at the end of the book too. But it says, Big Tancook Island is well known for its sauerkraut. Gotta love sauerkraut, right? From as far back as the mid-1800s, islanders grew and sold cabbage and sauerkraut, two of my favorites. Sheila has been making sauerkraut for decades. Back in 1989, she cut 7,000 pounds of cabbage. Today, while her production is slowed down, if you're lucky enough to get your order in early, you will get a taste of authentic Tancook sauerkraut, made as it was by the early settlers of the island. So neat. As with most Tancook residents, Sheila's talent is not only limited to making sauerkraut, she's also skilled at rug hooking and quilting. This sounds like a absolute Bali high, doesn't it? And from there, I'm going to loop a bit from the back. A rug that was taken from the photographer George Belrose, Vermont-based photojournalist. I'm going to show you the photo that he took. And you see the cabbages flying from the man to the woman in the field, and you see all the cabbages at the back of the truck. Beautiful older photo, right? And it did say about him, about this photographer, that he, a renowned Vermont photojournalist, has been visiting Big Tancook Island since 1972. Each summer during his stay on the island, he's photographed the everyday lives of island residents. So at the end of the book, she shows some rugs. Hetty shows some rugs that she's made that are based on his photographs, and this is one of them. So that was the photograph, and this is the rug. Let me just make sure you're in focus here. See that cabbage flying through the air. Isn't that beautiful? And Kaz says, that gave me the idea of hooking my husband making kimchi. Ooh, tell us what that is, Kaz. I don't know what that is. That's going to be a great rug, though. You hooked the beautiful one of your son in his crazy costume drumming, right? So maybe you should hook the whole family sooner or later. That would be really nice. I absolutely love this image. I absolutely love it. I hope that you're getting some great inspiration from this. I know I am. They're also just beautiful to look at. This one was great too. A seaside place called Blackpool. So this is Blackpool, like in England. And this is a great story. Let me show you the rug first. There's a famous, don't make too much noise, Ted. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool. Let me get your face back in there. Okay. A little bit of weirdness, a little bit of a weird intermission, my sweetheart. So this is a funny story. And again, this is one of these things. You wonder how these things began. So she says, my husband and I first met David at the Canada Day celebrations in 2016. This chance encounter was such a delightful experience that it factored into our decision to move to Tancook on a permanent basis. Soon into our conversation with David, we discovered that he and my husband Ward shared a common talent. Both could recite the classic poem, The Lion and Albert. So this is, this made me have to, Cass says it's a Korean pickled cabbages. Interesting. There's a rug forming here. I had to pull up this poem, and it's actually much longer than this, but I pulled this up off the internet. It's one of these classic sort of British rhyming poems with using a lot of sort of British sort of Cockney slang, very funny rhymes, but a long poem about this family going to this couple, the Ramsbottoms, going to the zoo with young Albert, and they're sort of in their Woolworth clothing. They're very kind of unimpressed by the sea. They said nobody drowned. The sea wasn't like a crazy sort of tsunami. It wasn't doing special effects. It was all kind of dull. So they went over to the zoo, and it's quite a long poem, but they get their old ales and their sandwiches out, and they're looking at the animals of the zoo. And in part of the poem, I know, Kaz, I figured, in part of the poem, Albert starts to poke at this lion right here, right, poking him in the ear. And that's part of the, I guess this is one of the classic illustrations from the poem. But then I looked again at the rug, and I saw that that was included in the design of the rug. And I thought, isn't that funny? Isn't that just the way it is sometime? And you know, I absolutely love this story because it made me think, again, when you're having a conversation with somebody new, if you don't say to them, so what do you do for a living? You find other interesting things, like you both have this amazing, because this is a long poem. I mean, this is quite a feat to be able to memorize something as long as this poem. I mean, it's just so interesting. You get to different places when you take a different path, right? And I just thought it was so interesting because I love stories like this. It's so quaint. But it also reminded me of the way that, since I'm such an older mother and had both of the kids in my 40s, the way that they make friends. It's very simple, right? There is no judgment. They're just, and even for myself, my first friend, when I went into first grade at St. Luke's, the thing that we had in common was that we had the same Scooby-Doo lunchbox, and she's still my friend. And we really don't have anything else in common to this day. We're both women, you know, we both have had children, we both had a Scooby-Doo lunchbox, but that obviously hasn't been enough over the years, but just starting that friendship and then building it over the years, it's such a nice start. It's a great story and it's a funny start. So that rug, I think that rug is just a gem, sort of crystallizing that moment of the friendship sort of happening, right, beginning. I love it. I love this one too. I'll show you this rug, and they're not genetically modified. This beautiful rug. And of course you are getting a sense of the fishing and the agriculture here, right? The sea and the gardens are a huge part of life. Isn't that amazing? You know, the compositions are so amazing too. This almost reminds me of like sort of a medieval composition, like an illuminated kind of a manuscript. The way that the tomatoes are on the tree, it's a very strong composition. And they're not genetically modified. She said, if you ever have the opportunity to visit Earl in his garden, you will undoubtedly learn a great deal about the benefits of organic gardening. This sounds like a conversation that could go on for a while, right? Earl is well known for his passion for healthy eating and chemical-free horticulture. As newcomers to Tancook, we could often find Earl's spinach or strawberries at our doorstep. So he's the neighbor that would bring baskets and leave baskets of food on the doorstep. This is Earl. Doesn't he look lovely? He's somebody that I could absolutely get in a very long conversation about gardening and organic food with. Not everybody, but this looks like somebody that I absolutely could fall into that for an endless amount of time. So this is the rug that I used. I'm flipping a little bit. This is the rug that I used for our thumbnail tonight, tootling around. And this got a lot of nice comments in our Facebook group. By the way, if you are not in our Facebook group and you're on Facebook, our Facebook group is called Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. The and. It's a very nice group. We're heading towards 7,000 people right now, and that is the biggest rug hooking group in this country. And these are all nice people. You are all such nice people in there. And I don't always have the time to say it, and I don't always think to say it. But I am so grateful every time I go on that website, that page, and I see such encouraging, positive, friendly conversation happening. Helpful, forthcoming, helping out beginners. I don't see any of the insanity and sort of cowing that I see sometimes in other places that makes me super sad and often quite mad. Absolutely love the page. So if you're not a part of that page, do join. Tara, her pieces are amazing, aren't they? I knew that you would love them. I knew that you would love them. Let me make sure you can see this one tootling around. I'd like to have something to tootle around with. She's a very stoic looking lady too. Here she is. It is nice to tootle, isn't it? I think we all feel that way. That's why we're all here. And I bet a bunch of you are tootling around at this moment with your projects, right? So tootling around, Jenny has been hooking subtle rugs for about 60 years, S-U-T-T-L-E. Tancook is well known for this style of hooking, and Jenny is a master of the art form. The subtle, sometimes referred to as proddy. So again, this is something I had not heard before. Of course, we've heard of proddy and proggy in Britain, but I had not heard subtle yet. So that's a really important one. I'm ashamed to say I hadn't learned that because I'm working on a book that includes proddy, and I had not heard that one yet. But it's a style of hooking that involves poking scraps of fabric through the holes of burlap. And by the way, I'm just going to add here a plug for Janet Connor, whose work I love, and I talk about her often. I think Janet Connor hooked rugs on the internet. She's amazing, and I know you already know the name. But if you happen to be getting into proddy, subtle, and you are looking for a Prati tool, either the wooden one that kind of pokes, she sells those very reasonably. Regular wooden ones for $15, the colored ones that look like the colorful salt and pepper shakers, all the different layers of wood in different colors, those are $20. And then she sells what I think are like elk horns or something like that, flat pieces that you can also do Prati with. She sells those three things. And she also sells, if you ever poke around looking at Prati, because it's very hard to find Prati equipment in the US or in North America, real specific things that could help you do Prati faster. They're all sort of in the rag rugging world of England, right? And then the shipping is something like $20. But she sells the Prati tools, and she sells that thing that looks like the wooden Scrabble thing, right? It's like a long, skinny piece of wood with a slit down the center. So you can literally take your rag strips, your quilting leftover strips or whatever, wrap it around, and then you just take your scissors like this right up the center, and then you've got a bunch of Prati pieces of fabric to hook. You can also do it with yarn. If you do latch hook, and cut it up the center, and then you have all your individually cut yarns that you selected, rather than having to be acrylic, which of course they could be, but they could also be your crazy mohair and your leftover knitting stuff. But those tools are very hard to find in the US, even on Etsy, and Janet Connor has them in her store. So I thought I would just mention that if you ever go down the subtle, S-U-T-T-L-E, Prati road. When you live on an island, nothing is wasted. And rug hooking is a good example of this way of life, as all sorts of fabrics can be reused, from old clothing to blankets. Interesting. In conversation with Verta, a well-known Tancook rug hooker, Jenny told her that she just likes to have something to tootle around with. That's a great quote to pull from somebody, isn't it? That's why it made its way onto this rug. Thank you, Kirsten. Oh, I love this one too. This is just a different direction. This took me here. Let me show you the image first. It's so different. No shadows. Come on. Trying to get the light just right. It's hard at night, isn't it? So one of the deer is saying, "I prefer mine peeled," and the other saying, "I'm glad they left the greens on." It looks like they're eating little carrots there, doesn't it? Now this one was interesting because it wasn't about a person, it was about the wildlife. And she says, some people love them, some don't. It's the same here. Either way, it is safe to say that Big Tancook Island has more than its fair share of deer. They boldly graze in gardens, on lawns, and just about anywhere else that they can find something green to eat. As sometimes happens, controversy arises when there is a conflicting approach to managing wildlife. Some residents feed the deer, others don't. Right or wrong, good or bad, the deer come out on top, of course. And it is easy to imagine a conversation they might be having when stumbling on fresh, abundant serving of carrots, right? That people would have maybe left out, or maybe they find them in someone's garden. And then there's one of these little characters here. But I just thought this was another great subject for a rug, because we tend to, particularly on Facebook, I don't participate anymore. I've learned my lesson so many times. Participating in crazy conversations where people are emotional and getting on their soapbox about a certain thing. Why not take that very focused energy in conversation and turn it into a hooked rug? Two sides of the story, add a little bit of dialect like this, a little bit of text, and you've got a great composition for a rug. And you've managed to put your point across at the same time. And it's also a moment in time, isn't it? Because in 100 years, people might say, why do they ever bother being upset with the deer for rifling through the gardens? Who knows? It's a statement, and it's a nice, timely idea to make a rug with this kind of a message. That one was really different. I was happy to stumble on that. Oh, God, I think this one might be my favorite one. My 170th species. Get ready. Caroline. The faces in each rug is so vivid with expression, so lovely. Absolutely agree. And Hetty, you have really, for the different rugs, I really noticed you really capture in every rug something about that person. The one that really struck me was this one. That's pretty iffy, ain't it? Right. This character is Neil. So I was looking at the rug here, and I was looking at his face, and I was looking at his face over here, and I was just thinking, you really nailed the face, the nose, and the lips, right? Everything, because he's got glasses on, so it's hard to see the eyes, but specifically the lips really are his lips, right? That nice, soft, rounded sweep. That is truly what his mouth looks like. Really capture the character of him. When I flipped through, I feel like maybe I didn't show you. Did I show you Sheila from the back in '89? I cut 7,000 cabbages. I showed you the rug, but I can't remember if I showed you the picture of her. These are just such beautiful panoramic pictures. I mean, it really gives you terrible wanderlust, doesn't it? And you know, isn't it, it's, besides, when I think about the idea of islands, right, and I think about the islands that I go to a lot, the Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket, I'm not really part of that scene, and I'm sure I never have the right handbag or nail polish on. I'm sure my nails aren't even clean. But, you know, when you go there, there's always that weird dichotomy, the beautiful, the Jaws beaches, right, the beautiful, eternal beaches, and lighthouses, and all of these sort of architectural follies that we see that we equate with old New England, and they're so charming. But then there's always the interference and that sort of wall of people that can, and stores, that can really trip you up, with lots of stuff in the windows that's super expensive, galleries that are super, everything is sort of outside of my price range. And sometimes I feel a bit backed up, or I feel like I wish that they weren't there and it was just a bit more wild and there wasn't such a divide between all these different sort of aspects of the island. But on this island, I love the way you have the natural beauty, but it also appears that people are working and people are friendly. It's just a very different island than one that I have ever been to, which makes me want to go there all the more. So this rug, my 170th species. This is the rug. We're going to come back to it in a minute, because once you really see it, it's going to mean a lot more. See if I can bring it closer. I know there's an awful glare. Maybe like this even. If this is the Eastern Phoebe, then I believe I have photographed my 170th species here on Tancook. Is that amazing or what? That makes me want to start bird watching. So Hillary has so many gifts. One of them is her extraordinary ability to identify birds by their calls. When she heard the call of a bird that was not yet on her list, she announced, "If this is an Eastern Phoebe, then I believe I may have photographed my 170th species here on Tancook." Hillary is in harmony with the natural world and delights in all that it has to offer. If you have time to count the birds in this rug, I believe that you will find 170. Let's take another look. We won't count them, but you see all these little black marks in the background? Those are the 170 birds. And what a nice touch that is, sort of flapping their wings in the distance. What a great sort of laundry list or catalog of all of these different birds, all captured on this rug. I think this one is my favorite. I absolutely love the idea behind it. It's like a collection, looking at a collection on the rug, and the joy on her face is really telling. Hey, Susie! Absolutely love it. Oh, okay, maybe one more. And I'm not going to do the whole book again because I want to leave a lot of meat on the bone for you to enjoy the book if you end up ordering it. This will be a bedside book that you need to go to bed a little bit early that night, because you're going to want to read about all these people and look at them close up. I keep looking at the photos really close up, you know, just checking out every detail. You get so many clues from a person. They all seem like such nice, open people, you know. What? They get shrimp? Let's see. This is an auto. This is an auto. I wonder what happened. This is the one called What? They Get Shrimp? Let me maybe turn it this way again. Let me bring it in focus first. Oh, Hetty, don't get me started. I'll be there tomorrow. I will certainly come visit. I certainly will. I have a feeling I'm going to fall into a terrible rabbit's hole and not come back. It wouldn't take a lot. So you can see this picture. What? So the seagull's going, what? They get shrimp? And the cat's being very ungrateful are saying, not shrimp again. Well, this is a great story too, because the thing about these rugs, I mean, this is storytelling rugs. This is what we talked about all night for hours last night doing our Frida Kahlo class, telling stories through your work, right? She told through her paintings. we tell through our rugs or other mediums that you might do. It's so, we said at the end of the class yesterday, what a beautiful and powerful thing it is to be able to have a story to tell and to be able to tell it, right? Because you trip yourself up and make excuses and have 100 different reasons for not getting going. But this book will certainly put you in a place in your mind where no matter what kind of a mood you are and what kind of a place you're in and what kind of a week it's been or year it's been or a decade it's been, you can still find inspiration and think back, whether they're people who are currently in your life, think back to people and places and situations. Remember the deer with the carrots, and think to yourself, I have a lot of stories in me, right? Even if you're completely alone, I have a lot of stories in me, and you can bring them out in this way. There's so many great examples in this book. So what? They get shrimp. Anyone on Tancook will confirm that Leslie loves animals and animals love her. If a stray cat arrives at Leslie's door, it will soon become part of the family. Wouldn't you stay if you were fed luxury pet meals, including shrimp, scrambled eggs, and bacon? The only creature none too pleased about the new arrivals at the door is Cecil, Leslie's pet seagull, who taps at the kitchen window when he feels hungry. Cecil is not too pleased about his meal of bread when he sees what the more recent arrivals are being fed. So they're having very luxurious meals. It sounds like it's a full blast restaurant there. And poor Cecil is in the window saying, what? They got shrimp? That is just too cute. I love the interior too. I just love that. You know, you just don't need, hi Lisa, you don't need a lot of elements in your rug, do you? Particularly when you're using text. And how powerful it is to use text. Remember that great hack, if you are hooking text, to hook your text first in a wider cut than you plan to use as a placeholder, then hook around it, then pull it out, and then hook in the more narrow piece that you always meant to use in the first place, because then your text won't get crowded. I don't know if that's what Hetty's doing, but your text looks perfect, so I'm guessing you're doing some kind of a trick like that. It's always so hard to do text, but it's so perfect here. I'm guessing you have a trick. Maybe that's the one. But don't be discouraged from hooking text if you're new to doing that. Just use that really simple trick. Just put it in as a placeholder, pull it out, and put something more narrow in, and then it won't be all crowded and sort of deformed, right? Maybe we'll look at one more. Oh dear. Okay. This one really got me too, because I think if you're watching the show, you also love history, right? Because we talk about history so often. Carrie says, Hetty, I admire your ability to capture the essence of the people on your island. I do too. That really, you make it look very easy. And the more I look at these compositions, I think it's a lot of talent here, right? It's a perfect storm of talent and technical skills and inspiration. But everybody can give it a try, right? Absolutely give it a try. Because yours will be different anyway. Everybody's is always going to be different and special and unique. This is a neat one. This is taken from an old photo. Now, this is another great idea when you're thinking about inspiration or you're lost for inspiration. I'm going to first show you the photo. Right. So this is a boat builder. You can see a beautiful picture. It looks like he has a picture of the sea on the wall behind him. Quite handsome man too. So this is Amos Stevens, master boat builder. He was born in 1850 on Big Tancook Island, and during his illustrious career as a boat builder, he is credited with being the most prolific builder of the Tancook whaler. The whaler served the fishermen and coastal traders of the era. He also designed and built the internationally sought-after Tancook schooner. So he was, in this, she's citing the source of this information as www.stevenssailloft.ca for Canada. And this is the rug that she did. Again, quick glimpse at Amos, and then at the picture. So Hetty has dropped in, again, beautiful text. She's dropped in background. And it is so effective. So, I mean, one can never really say, I have absolutely no inspiration. We always use, postcards and talk about using postcards, photographs of people. And then what a fantastic and theatrical thing to be able to drop a background like a theater flat behind the character, right? I just love that. I think that is so charming, and I think it's charming, and the important thing is also the idea that that's just another source to pull from as a rug hooker. I have to do this one. I have to do this one. Not a bad place to end up. So this is going to be about Lucy Neatby. Remember the key, getting to the island, famous knitter, coming to the island, and she said, I know how to get into that house. I know how to get that key, that serendipitous moment that was a great turning point in this story. So this is the rug first. And one of her quotes, on my first visit to Tancook, I walked past the cemetery and thought, this wouldn't be a bad place to end up. Isn't this great? I love this composition too. I kept looking at the position of the boat beside her, and I thought that was so interesting. I know the placement probably had to do with the text as well, but it has that feeling of coming and going, you know, and she stayed. So it was almost like, you know, the ending of the story. There's this sort of hint of the boat being transportation or rescue or a link to the mainland. But in this case, we know that she has a house here, and here she is. It's a great photo. Such a good photo. So this says, not a bad place to end up. About a decade ago, Lucy made her first visit to Big Tancook Island. And as she walked past the cemetery, she mused, that wouldn't be a bad place to end up. Shortly after this visit, Lucy bought a house on the island. And when she's not somewhere else in the world teaching knitting to her vast collection of devotees, she is most content in her island home. Since moving to Tancook, Lucy has added rug hooking to her list of artistic endeavors. And her first mat has been featured in Rug Hooking Magazine. That's fantastic, isn't it? I'm going to have to look that up. If anybody knows what issue that is, let me know, because then maybe I could show it on Coffee Time on Monday. I would love to see that. I can look it up too, of course. I'll see if there's some kind of an index about. So yeah, there's a lot more. They are all equally beautiful. I just don't want to do too much spoiling. There are some beautiful rugs of some young people here. I do have to show this one. I find ideas everywhere. I love this one too because it really relates to what we do. Bring it in here. I find ideas wherever I look. I've always got a mat on the bars. You know, and if you do have that feeling, if that's your experience, then you are so lucky, right? Because it's like, for other people, it's a drought sometimes for a very long time. And isn't it cyclic, right? Doesn't the pendulum swing wildly? Because sometimes, don't you feel like Chrissy, I don't know if Chrissy's on tonight, but she just wrote today and said she's been designing like crazy. She said, I'll never finish all the rugs that I've been drawing in my lifetime. So there are moments that are like it's feast and famine, right? The yin and the yang, all these crazy balances in our lives. But sometimes all you want to do is design, and you don't want to hook. You don't want to be bothered with strips and cutting and the physical project itself. But then other times you just have no ideas and no inspiration. I think most people work like that. But Verta is never at a loss for ideas for her hooked mats. She sees ideas everywhere she looks. Most of her mats have a Tancook theme, and Verta hooks her mats on a set of bars, just as her predecessors did. Verta's hooked rugs are highly sought after by local residents and many visitors to the island. Verta has been instrumental in the revival of rug hooking on Tancook, and the weekly rug hooking sessions at her home have become the highlight for all of us who participate. Well, that really gets me, doesn't it? I hadn't read that part yet. That really gets me. Hetty, we always say coffee time. We have coffee time in the mornings, and on Fridays we do our cocktail night at this time. But we always say we sometimes look at old magazines, life magazines and things, and once in a blue moon you get this beautiful spread of a group of women sitting in somebody's house in the middle of the day while the husbands are out at work, all dressed up with their costume jewelry and their nice clothing, and sitting and hooking rugs on their laps, not on bars or frames or any, just on their laps. And whenever we stumble upon that kind of an article in an old vintage magazine, people are commenting like crazy on the sidebar saying, God, I wish it was still the time in the world where in your neighborhood down your street, you could kind of hook up with your neighbors and just sit and do this together, because it's so companionable and it's so helpful for beginners, checking out other people's techniques and ideas. But mostly it's so companionable, and rarely, I think anywhere do we have this. So it is such a nice thing to know that on Tancook, another huge plus for the island, this still exists. And here's, again, Verta. I'm going to have to look up her rugs, too. Maybe this is going to be a Monday project for me over the weekend, trying to find some references so I can do some more looping back. Rug hooking history is so interesting, Susie, isn't it? So interesting. All of these forms of rug making are interesting, but I think for me at least, rug hooking is particularly interesting because it's so distinctly North American, and there's not so many things that we can say are. So this one is one that we really can truly own, and for that reason, I just love digging into it. And I was chatting with Janet Connor the other day, actually. She was on her way, I think, to Texas, but she was talking about another book idea for herself, and we started to swap ideas and brainstorm about different schools of hooking and different times, different moments in hooking. And it is such a rich but such a narrow history. And it's a history that not everybody's interested in. That's why we really have to try to make ourselves a bit more visible and present, and try to get newcomers to the scene to understand that making a rug is making a textile, and that rug making is a medium. And whether you need a rug or not is not the thing. You're just using rug hooking as your medium, as you would painting or sculpture or cooking or writing or anything. I think that's the thing with most people. It sounds like you're making a rug for the floor, and it's a bit overwhelming. But we know that it's just making textile art, and it's the best, isn't it? Marty, if we as friends don't start meeting up with our friends, then who will? Absolutely. That's absolutely true. And I know the Atha chapters. There's so many Atha chapters, and if you don't belong to one, or if there's not one near you, that's super rough. I know there's tons, and that is really a great place to get meeting people. And as you know, I belong to 4. I think I'm gonna have to make it 5, because Liz pointed out to me that there is a Good Wives chapter that I wasn't aware of that's near us. But I belong to 4 around Connecticut, and then the Rhode Island is no longer an Atha chapter, the Little Rhodey Thrummers. But I like to belong to all of them because they all have different speakers. There's different people at all. There's usually nice people at all, but I know who's at which. I know I have better connections with some people, and I fall into groups with others. Sometimes I feel like I'm not the cool kid at all, and I'm kind of sitting on the outskirts, so I'm more likely to go to the others. I mean, you figure that out as you go along, but there's one thing's for sure. At every Atha meeting, I hope that you find the very lovely people. In case you're having trouble connecting or falling in, if you're a new person, really make your way, square peg, circle hole, force your way in and find those very lovely people who are there, who want to share, who live near you, because those will be your immediate local people that you can start planning things with, on a regular basis. And that is what a gift, right? What a gift. Please do. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I always mention that the Atha magazine, which is my favorite of the rug, I love Rug Cooking magazine, but I really love Atha magazine. I love them both. That's very different than you can subscribe to Atha magazine and or belong to a chapter. They're 2 different things, and they're both super rewarding. But in terms of socializing and finding companionship, that would be a very good start, because it's like a needle in a haystack. If you say who knits, everybody will put their hands up. But if you say who rug hooks, people will say who raw cooks, right? Have you ever had that? Oh, what do? You raw cook? Isn't that an oxymoron? I mean, people have not even heard of it in general, and that is so scary at this point. The best way to learn is to join up with other hookers via hook-ins and gatherings. It's a great way to learn. You get so many tips from different people. And at least in our local Athas, I assume it's the same, you're absolutely allowed to go and check it out and see if it's your thing. Because, some people, especially if you're coming alone, have that feeling of awkwardness, like walking in. So sometimes it's nice to know that you don't have to make a commitment, that you can just go in and see how it goes, and hopefully find friends and find a nice place to sit. Hopefully you don't make an entrance like I did when I first entered the quiet corner and I tripped and my bag spilled, and out came a tampon and a dog bone. Not a great first impression, but I stuck with it because what else could I do? And some of those people are my friends. I'm sure some of them still remember those 2 things that fell out of my purse when I tripped. But, what can you do? Such is life. it is a really good place to start, really good, and to stay. It's a good place to stay. And our chapter number 1, the Nutmeg chapter, I'm very happy that it's number 1. It feels like there's a little prestige there. Janet, the president, is so kind and nice and welcoming to new people. And she does have weekly things at a senior center here, and I go when I can, which isn't very often, but it is such a nice thing. One more. There are so many in here. This one I really like because it has a bit of a sad twist to it. This one is called Mary's Little Lamb, and I'm going to tell you the story here first. It is so we're talking about Atha. How can I subscribe to Atha magazine? So Carrie, go on to just Google Atha magazine, and you'll see it's like a bi-monthly. It is fantastic information, articles. I cover it always on Coffee Time. I cover what some of my favorite features are, and look for people who I know participate in this show, give great shout outs to those people. But you'll immediately find it online, payment via PayPal, so really easy to do, but super, 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 super well worth the money. I mean, you'll be looking at that magazine all month, and by the time you're finished looking at it, the next one comes. Yeah, rug cooking is originally a North American craft. So I won't totally take a complete departure, but at one time, earlier in the 20th century, it was believed to be at one point Egyptian, at one point Scandinavian, and there was a lot of crossover because people who were coming, for example, from Scandinavia and right underneath in the British Isles, they were doing a lot with rag rugs, and that's where the term thrumming comes from, because that's a sailing term that has to do with all of the cut yarn that you would put around the ropes near the sail so that it didn't flap and cut anybody's hand off. It would be like the yarns that were cut would kind of soften the blow every time the sail flapped, which was constant and powerful and violent. So thrums were these pieces of yarn, like little strips, and thrumming was putting them into something. So people, including sailors, began thrumming. But over the years, between I would say the 1970s and now, historians have since concluded that a lot of the rugs that we previously and originally thought were hooked rugs that came, for example, from Egypt and Scandinavia before the middle or 1840s, middle of the 19th century, they were actually rugs made in a different way. So still rugs, still the same thing, but not made with a hook. Often sewn, right? Often using a different tool to put the pieces into the rug. And it's very hard to tell the difference between many kinds of sewn rugs, like the caterpillared or sheared rugs. Very hard to tell by looking at them, particularly if they're worn, how they were made. But over the years, with more scholarship and more looking at old rugs, we do have the distinction now that the first known hooked rugs are from around the 1840s North America, but not clear at all whether it is, for example, Canada or northern New England. And it doesn't really matter. But one day we will find that special diary in somebody's attic that was saved that will give us some kind of Rosetta Stone, the missing link to the entire story. Oh, good. I'm glad you're having this conversation about Atha. This is a lot of information, and just be connected in as many ways as you can. And then you find, I'm going to stop in a minute because I'm doing and it's important, but it shows you all the different chapters of Atha all over the country and what they're doing. So, for example, in 2020, lots of Atha chapters were doing challenges with worms, using up your scraps. Not every store was open. A lot of things were hard, supplies were hard to get, and people started doing scrap rugs more often. So a lot of the chapters did that. But the point is, you can really see what people in different chapters are doing. You can see news from those chapters, and you can figure out what chapters are closest to you and what kind of a what kind of a social life they have going. Because of the ones I belong to, some constantly have speakers, and quite important speakers, and others hardly ever, but a lot of events and a lot of field trips and things like that, or just getting together. Incidentally, you just reminded me, I'm speaking the first week of December, I think I said the 4th, right, at the White Mountain Woolen Magic Guild, which I think is number 52 in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. And I'll be presenting on the subject of the Alice Butler rugs that we know and love. So that's coming up a little bit later if you're anywhere in that region. But highly recommend, and can't get enough of. So I first want to tell you the story of this rug. I think this will be the last rug that I cover tonight. I love this book, but I want to leave a lot of meat on the bone and a lot to your sort of imagination, because I hope that you will get this book. It is on Amazon. It is a bargain. And this will keep you busy with a lot of inspiration and reading. Mary's Little Lamb. So this is how the story goes. Sometime in the early 1900s, Sophia Baker, shown here with her husband Israel Baker, hooked a mat entitled Mary's Little Lamb, which was sent to King George V and his wife, Queen Mary. Unfortunately, the king would not receive gifts from people that he did not know, and the mat was returned with a letter. Sophia and Israel framed the mat and the letter and hung it in their good room, right? The front room, the parlor. Now, Clara Dennis, let me show you this first. Oh, sure thing. This is another beautiful, using again, Hetty, another beautiful old photograph as the inspiration. And here is Mary's Little Lamb hooked. And you can see here is the letter and I think even the envelope from King George V that was returned. Really exciting. And obviously the little lamb, Mary had a little lamb. Their loss, right? Their loss. Clara Dennis, a renowned photographer who was on tour of Nova Scotia documenting people and places, visited Big Tancook Island in the 1920s and captured this photo of Sophia and Israel holding the mat. Here's the heartbreak. Sadly, this whimsical mat seems to have disappeared. So I'm going to show you Hetty's hooked rug based on this photograph, but for God's sake, if you find this hooked mat anywhere in the world in your travels, again, one more time with the photo, please pick it up and let us know that it's there. Because knowing you can keep it, we just need to know where it is, right? We need to document all this great rug hooking history. It could be that it's gone, but let's not even think about that, right? It's got to be in somebody's attic. Isn't that gorgeous? What a tribute, right? And I mean, it must have been terribly disappointing to get it back. But isn't it sweet how they put the letter in the envelope there with it? That's pretty touching. So needless to say, there's a lot more to this book. I'm just flipping through it like a pig and not sharing. But again, I don't want to spoil the whole thing for you. There are tons more rugs, and they are so glorious. There's a lot of landscape rugs. And at the end, Hetty gives some facts about the island, which is really helpful. Places it on the map, Nova Scotia. Sue's ordered the book. I know there's going to be it's going to be a big night for ordering the book. And then, of course, when people replay this video, because I don't see Anne, and you know she buys every book before I even finish saying the title of the book, and then her husband blames me, who he thinks is a bookseller, for her collection of books, which seems unfair, Anne. But a few brief facts about Tancook Island, and she's got some really neat things about the ferry ride, the distances, the size of the island, just things like the wildlife on Tancook is limited to deer, muskrats, snakes, pheasants, rabbits, and a large variety of birds, right? Remember the bird rug? Big Tancook was settled in the late 1800s by German and French immigrants. Lots of little facts. The island's fire and medical emergency services run exclusively by volunteers. Main industry is lobster fishing. So over the course of reading this book, you not only get to know the author, who is amazing, beautifully written book, very engaging book, beautifully written book, super charming. But the showstopper, of course, are these amazing rugs. I mean, these are amazing rugs on every page. Truly amazing. You got the book at the start of the episode. You will not be sorry. It is truly amazing. So, and then you learn a little bit about the island. And really, with something like this, you get so much inspiration, so much happy reading, and you really are taking a trip for a while. You're going to feel, when you finish reading this book, you're going to feel like you've been there. And that is such a nice thing, isn't it? No, I think I'm good with wine. I'm being offered more wine, but my mouth has been running for so long.
What?
Well, Hetty, thank you so much for this incredible piece of work. And when I watched the video, which is again attached to the description, the exhibit of this book, it's a short exhibit, but it's beautiful, and you're seeing some of the pieces hanging up. I wish I could have been at that exhibit. I wish I would have known, but I'm very grateful to Lisa for making me aware of this book, because if I didn't have it in my collection, and if I wasn't able to share it here tonight with you so that you could get it too, I would feel super remiss, wouldn't I? It would be terrible. So yeah, I have enjoyed this book immensely. This was the perfect Friday night cocktail time book for me. I absolutely loved it. And I needed it. This has been a hard week for me working on my book project, working on trying to get Teddy into school with all the autism problems and fighting with the town. Got a letter from the tax people today. I just started the company and I didn't know that you're supposed to file something 4 times a year. I didn't know. And I got this nasty gram and I did one of these, like, I looked at it and what I owed and I thought, did I do that kind of thing? And it just hasn't been a good day. But this brought it right back to happy center, right? Happy balance center. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate having you all on tonight. So I will be on for coffee time on Monday. I might not run as many episodes in the next couple of weeks as I typically do. Normally it's pretty much every day I'm with you, either live or on Zoom. But I do have deadlines coming up for this book. So I want to remind you, if you have great examples of either hooking, but more specifically, I do need hooking too, but more specifically, different forms of rug making, rag rug making, proddy, quilly, crocheted rugs, lamb's tongues, cat's paw, anything, any kind, anything done not on a loom, anything done with a needle, hook, implement, punch, miniature punch, anything like that. Please send rugs that, you know, I will try to put in as many rugs as I can of friends, us, right, to share that, so you have that experience too of having something beautiful of yours in a fancy book that's in every bookstore. I'll make that as possible as I can for as many people as I can. So look through the rugs that you've got and see what examples you could send me specifically. Also braided rugs. I need braided rugs. So that I don't have to just have my examples and I don't have to make a ton of extra rugs. I'm making plenty as is. So if you can help with that and if you feel like helping with that, I would love to see the rugs that you send me. And of course I will give you full credit. And if you have a store or website, a brand, of course I will plug your brand too. I always want to sort of reciprocate, help, and plug other people's brands, right? Always. So something to think about over the weekend. But I will be back with you on Monday. I'm not sure what the subject will be. It seems like a lifetime between now and then. At least one corn maze in between. But yeah, I will see you on Monday, and then we'll see where the schedule brings us for next week. I want to remind you that next weekend, next Saturday, I will be teaching way up in northern Vermont at Mad River Fiber. So I know that there's quite a few people in that class already, but there are still some openings. And I would love to see you in Vermont. I'm teaching a combination of rug hooking and punch needle. So there's 2 different designs, mug rug size, and you will get the hook and the punch needle and a hoop. And I'm bringing tons of frames with combs, particularly for punchers to start on, you know, just to be sure that you get going, get some traction. Really make some progress before you're kind of left on your own with your tools to pick it up again. But it's going to be a great class, and I don't know that I've chosen the 2 designs yet, but there'll be 2 beauties, and I would super love to see you there. And then the following weekend, I'll be on Cape Cod again at Salt Yarn and doing a class choosing either punch or hooking, the owl pattern from last September, which was Moonlight Becomes You, ribbon candy hooking, or the November one, Native Tom, remember the all yarn one? Those will be the 2 choices for the Cape Cod class 2 weekends from now. So I hope to see you soon regardless. But certainly in the meantime, have a wonderful weekend. A huge thank you again to Hetty for this tremendous book. You must get it. You must get it. It is that good. Such a fantastic book and stories. It is, Kirsten. It is so good. And thank you, Hetty, for signing on. It's so nice to know that the author is with us. It makes it extra special. Kaz, oh, you are so welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who tuned in tonight. Have a great, happy weekend. Enjoy, hopefully, beautiful fall weather. And I will certainly see you on Monday at coffee time, noon Eastern Standard Time. Same place, same channel, same everything.